Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, I'm going to bring you guys an update on my Eye of Winter Inquisitor Miner. So this is going to be the absolute degenerate giga damage setup. So I'm not going to be talking too much in depth about the build. I'm just going to be feeding you guys the POV as well as explaining the main parts of it, because I don't think that anybody who's not an advanced player should be actually playing this. You're going to have a really bad time. However, for the specific farming either invitation or uber bosses, I don't think there's any build that can do what this build is capable of doing on this sort of budget. It is truly absolutely insane. Anyways, now let's talk about why I'm even bringing this up and why I think it's important. It's because right now, with the current state of the game and the annihilation of a lot of farming strategies that used to be very, very lucrative, there's not much else to actually farm. I've seen Grimro put out videos on giga juicing maps and getting not even 5 divines an hour. It's a bit of a shame, because if you convert this to 5x an hour, in previous leagues, that would have been laughable in terms of currency per hour. It's just the state of the game. However, farming uber bosses, and especially very quickly, is very lucrative. We can look on the Casual Exile document, and you can see that, for example, Uber Maven is roughly 72 chaos profit on average per kill. So hypothetically speaking, if you're capable of doing it in 1 minute and 30 seconds, you could basically do 40 Mavens per hour. At 72 chaos profit per Maven, divided by 160 divines, chaos per divine, that's 18 divines an hour. It's above and beyond any sort of farming strategy in the game right now, other than maybe farming for, offering 5-way services if you're capable of always having clients available. Now, this is also excluding the fact that you can also do some carries, right? If you're good enough and you know the mechanics quite well, which can push this number to probably somewhere around closer to 25 divines per hour. It's pretty similar when it comes to the Uber Searing and the Uber Eater. Probably somewhere even higher than this, because instead of taking a minute and a half, it takes really just about 30 seconds to kill the bosses, which is truly insane amounts of DPS. And the best part about it is that I've seen a lot of builds capable of doing this in previous leagues, such as my own build, which was 10 plus mirrors last league. Or for example, I saw a spectral throw build, like a deck stacking one last league as well, which was again multiple mirrors. This build can do this on literally 20 divines. It's pretty damn insane. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at the showcase, and then after that, we're going to talk about the POV. So the showcase here is recorded by one of my buddies because of my inability to play the game. So he basically did the setup, and then he's going to be showcasing it, and then pay attention to the number of memory games that Maven is going to do, and pay attention to the number of times that the actual brain is going to show up in the fight. Note that this is Uber Maven, not regular Maven. That's first phase done. Second phase done. Here comes the brain for the second phase. And here comes the magic trick. We go straight from the second phase to the actual final phase of the boss fight. We skip the entirety of the third phase, both in terms of the brain, the memory phase, the memory game, and killing Maven entirely. Pretty insane. Now, this video was 1 minute and 19 seconds, including loading screens, which means that it's pretty reliable to consider that you can do this in about 1 minute and 30, including everything, which is what brings us to that 18 divine per hour calculations, and probably somewhere closer to 25 divines per hour when it comes to the Uber Searing and Uber Eater, as long as you know the mechanics and you don't let him kill you off the bat. Pretty crazy stuff. How are we able to achieve this level of damage on this budget? Well, let me talk to you all about this. So, Annihilating Light, literally the best DPS weapon in the game, better than even 2 mirror tier weapons. Heatshiver is what allows us to get this level of damage. You can see that it literally doubles our damage here. 110% more damage from this helmet, and the reason for that is because of the 100% cold damage extra fire against frozen enemies. Now, we hit so hard that even though Eye of Winter doesn't hit particularly hard, it's more like a hit-based where it hits many times but not hard, we hit so incredibly hard that we are still able to freeze the Uber bosses. Now, we don't actually get to freeze them because they're immune to being completely slowed or frozen, but they still count as frozen, so this damage still applies. This is the only reason that we're able to literally skip the phases the way that I just showcased in that video from my buddy. So this helmet is pretty insane for this specific use case. You just need to get your build to where it does enough damage to freeze Ubers, which is not an easy feat, and I'll talk about that in a bit, why we're able to do this. So Skin of Lords, just anything is going to be good enough here. In terms of the keystones that you could get Mind Over Matter, saves you 1 point, Pain Attunement saves you 1 point, Eldritch Battery saves you 2 point. If you're going for a little bit more damage, you can get Iron Will for another like 4% damage, but overall, it's not all that great. So anything, whatever's the cheapest is what I would aim for. Now, if you want a really, really insane chest, you can actually go with the Skin of Lord. A Loyal. With a double corruption of Socketed Gem and Projectile Gem. Now, these are probably going to be non-existent, especially with the right colors, but you can see that you can get another 26% damage on this build if you're able to find one of those. So that is pretty insane. But for the most part, a Skin of Lords is going to be just fine. Boots, gloves are just going to be life and resistance and attributes, whatever you need. The Eldritch Implicit's Pierce is going to be really nice for mapping. It's going to be kind of necessary, and then Unearth for 10% more damage. If you can get it, get some which have Temple, damage against shield enemies. It's like 5% more damage, but it's not exactly a big deal if you can't get it, if they're too expensive. Boots, really simple stuff. Life resistance, move speed, dunzo. Action speed, if you can get it on the Implicit. It's not that useful, but it's nice for mapping because it's going to give you both move speed and throwing speed. Now, this is where a little bit of a portion of the build which cannot be changed happens, which is the amulet. It's very important that you get a reduced throw speed amulet with the adjacent animosity on the anoint, and you pair that up with slower projectile. This is going to slow your projectile down to a very small amount of speed, as you could see in the showcase here. The projectiles barely move whatsoever. Now, there's a bit of a misconception going around, I think, which is due to it's due to the Spectral Helix being able to basically hit the target many times. Eye of Winter can't do that. There seems to be a hard cap of about 4 hits per Eye of Winter, where you basically, no matter how slow the projectile is, it can't hit more than 4 times per Eye of Winter itself. So you might be wondering, well, Matt, if I was already getting 4 hits without slowing my projectile down, why do I need to slow this projectile down now if it's not going to get me more damage and more hits? Well, the reason, it's the exact same reason why we use Wave of Conviction traps on a Lab Runner for Uber Lab Running to be able to skip these arrow phases. The idea is that we need to get an overflow of damage within a single frame or a single server tick, basically, to where it does so much damage that it just bugs out the entire system and we can skip it. That's the entire reason. If we don't slow the projectile down, even if we had, say, close to twice this amount of damage without slowing the projectile down, we would not be able to skip the phases the way that is showcased in the video that we watched, because it would take too many frames, too many server ticks to get the damage down, so it wouldn't cause this bug, if you want to call it that. I don't know what actually happens on the science side of things. All right, Mark of the Shaper is going to be a ring of choice with an Elder Ring, and then Coward's Legacy, which is what allows us to go low life without reserving a large portion of our life for another 30% more damage. As you can see, this build is sitting at 545 increased damage and 612 more multiplier. That's why this build does so much damage. All right, the Flasks is where we get a lot of our crit. So if you turn off the diamond and the bottle phase, you can see we're sitting at 74% crit. We're sitting at 96. Very important that we use our Flask when we want big damage. A lot of our crit also comes from the base crit Hatred Watcher's Eye. Just a single stat, nothing else. And then the rest is just going to be clusters for the most part. Now, this tree is level 97. If you're not level 97, you could basically cut out one of these medium clusters and just add in a regular jewel. You'll see that this brings you to 91, which is very, very reasonable in terms of levels. So nothing else is really interchangeable. You probably are going to need to get this 30 dex node unless you get a bunch of dex on your clusters, which is possible given how many we have. We have 2 larges. But yeah, very important that we get the medium for Arcane Pyrotechnics, for Arcane Surge, 10% more damage, and then Guerrilla Tactics. Now, the way that I was able to fix this build in terms of mana by keeping it relatively cheap without using like a level 4 Enlighten is by using this small cluster here with Spiteful Presence. Now, if you wanted to invest more into the build and get even more damage, you can drop this, which is going to make it a little bit lower level, and then you can just use a regular jewel, and instead what you can do is get a level 4 Enlighten paired with the 90% cost and reservation multiplier on the Heatshiver, and that's basically going to make it so you don't need these 2 extra points. And you can even throw in like another medium, and you can see that these mediums are pretty insane. Like this node here is 7% damage, and this is 3%. So that's another 10% damage that you can go get if you're able to drop this. It just comes down to how much you want to spend on the build. Now, the ES is also pretty important. That's why I'm getting this melding wheel, as well as the mastery here for the 3% mana as extra ES, if you might be wondering. It's because we need enough energy shield to be able to use our Zealotry Divine Blessing, and the only way to do this is to get around 500 ES, and we won't really be able to do that with a Heatshiver. It's very easy to do with a Verity's Veil, which is like the mapping version of this build. You basically throw in a Verity's Veil with a magic ring, and you fix your resistances through all of your jewels instead, and then you're basically ready for maps. You're no longer gonna have any of the downsides of Coward's Legacy, and you're basically gonna be immune to curses. You're gonna have more ES, all that good stuff. And this build is very, very good for, say, invitation farming. It doesn't have any real defenses, but it actually doesn't feel squishy because we freeze everything. Now, for mapping, however, you'll want to change out your amulet, because obviously we don't want any of those reduced stuff for mapping, so just a regular amulet is going to be fine. And then you're also going to change slower projectile for trap and mind damage or some other support instead for mapping, because obviously slower projectile for mapping is going to feel really, really bad. So it's kind of up to you. Now, what I have here essentially is different support gems that you could use. So you could have basically Eye of Winter, Blast Chain, and Power and Swift Assembly are pretty much the things that are the mainstay. After that, you kind of get to decide. For bossing, obviously, you'll want to slow projectile, and you might want to be able to also map, so you'll have just a single green socket, which you'll trade in for trap and mind damage. But if you're only going to be bossing, then you can actually keep 2 greens and then just go with a single blue, or a third blue, I should say, for like increased crit damage. But for mapping, what I would recommend is basically to get 1 green, or 2 greens, so Swift Assembly, and then you'll have the interchangeable of Slower Proj and Trap and Mind damage, depending if you want to boss or if you want to map. And then you can also interchange Charge Minds and crit damage for bossing, and then Charge Minds for mapping, because it's going to give you Frenzy Charges, which is going to give you Throw Speed, which is going to feel really, really good, and it's going to make it so you're always crit capped without your Flasks. So that's kind of what I would do personally, but it's kind of up to you. And that's pretty much it for the actual gear. It's pretty basic stuff. Now, looking at the skill gems, we already looked over that. We have our Divine Blessing Zealotry set up, obviously. Righteous Fire for a big 40% more damage multiplier. Vitality, Arrogance, so that we can run Righteous Fire. And then you can see that this is, without our debuffs here with Sniper's Mark, Flame Wall, and Arcanist Brand. None of that are in the calculations. And the reason for that is because they're not applied on the bosses, right? We looked at the showcase. You can see that he kills Maven so fast, and he kills the brain so fast, he's not actually able to apply any of the debuffs. The boss just dies too quick. So when I made the POB, I made it to have enough damage and have enough crit and whatnot without the need for any debuffs. So yeah, that's what that is. And then the auras, obviously we're running Hatred, so we can run the Watcher's Eye. Purity of Elements, so that we can run Righteous Fire. It's kind of a mandatory thing, because it's really hard to cap your resistances without Annihilating Light. And then Skitterbots, because it's the by far best actual aura in terms of DPS. This is like 50% more damage. It only shows like 20% more on POB, but in reality, Skitterbots is like insane, the amount of damage that it gives you on either a miner or a trapper build, because of the fact that the Skitterbots can trigger your stuff and make them re-trigger and all that good stuff. But that's pretty much it for the build. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is going to be my final version of the Giga Damage Degenerate version. I might be looking at making a really, really high DPS version of the mapping setup for those who are interested in that, so that we can basically have like a mapping setup that also has really high damage, but we'll see. Before I go though, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters. So the three Alexes, Skady, Bearded Dave, Brandon, Gustavo, Tim, Domo, Same Desu, Miss, Jarl, Loopold, Mercury, as well as Nick, Patrick, Rascoil, Rocky, Solmonk, The Grey Master, Thomas Mass, Maestro, Nailed, Ven, Biz, Nictario, Noi, Xathion, Larsis. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this build update, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Good luck farming, and don't hate me if you absolutely hate the build. It's not my fault. I told you not to play it. Peace.